Today, we are joined by Tony Thurmond, California Superintendent of Public Instruction and candidate for governor. He's a Democratic candidate for governor. Mr. Thurmond, welcome. Welcome to our briefing. And please, you have 2 minutes for opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the opportunity today. I'm Tony Thurmond, and I'm running to be governor of California. I believe that a better California is possible and that we have to build it together. And my plan is to help our state build 2 million housing units to provide housing for those who are homeless, including the 10,000 homeless teenagers in our state, and to make sure that Californians have access to good paying jobs. I support single payer health care, and I plan to tax billionaires and to take the proceeds from those taxes to provide a tax credit to working and middle class Californians so that you all can have more money to pay for the rising cost of gas, groceries, and housing. I'm a California native. I was born at Fort Ord on the Army base to a mom who was an immigrant from Panama and a dad who was a soldier who came from Detroit by way of Mississippi. While my dad was off in Vietnam, my mom was raising 4 kids by herself, and then she got really sick. When I was 6 years old, my mom lost her battle to cancer, and her 4 kids got split up. And my 5-year-old brother and I both ended up living in Philadelphia with an older cousin who we had not met until we showed up on her doorstep. She raised us in a household without food. We use free lunches, food stamps, and government cheese and other forms of public assistance to manage. I got an education. It changed my life. I became a social worker. I worked jobs for $3 an hour. I worked in restaurants. I worked in UPS to make a difference. And then I became elected for the last 18 years as a city council member, school board member, state legislator, and twice elected as state superintendent. I've had the opportunity to work on all the key issues in the state. Housing, as the council member, building thousands of unit housing, building housing for homeless young adults as they were leaving foster care and managing their health care. I'll bring all these experiences to our state and to help make a better possible California for all the people of our state.
Thank you, Superintendent. Let's start with immigration, which is on everyone's minds here in this call, I'm sure. Some candidates for governor have called for abolishing Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Do you support abolishing ICE? And if so, what would that look like in practice?
Go
ahead.
Well, I was the first candidate to call for abolishing ICE. First of all, I am the son and grandson of immigrants. My mother was born in Panama. My grandmother was born in San Andres, Colombia. My grandfather in Jamaica. And they came to this country wanting to build a better life, just like many of the immigrants today who just want a chance to work, pay taxes, and live the American dream, oftentimes paying in the services that they can't even get anything back in return. And so as governor, I will work with Congress to abolish ICE and to create a better system. ICE was supposed to be a way to keep us safe, as they said, but who are they keeping us safe from? Look at who's being deported. People who work as childcare workers and farm workers. Meanwhile, people are losing their lives for speaking out against ICE. I'll go beyond just saying we need to abolish ICE. I've used my platform to pass legislation that today has kept ICE out of California schools and hospitals. And now I'm sponsoring legislation that would put a tax on any company that operates an ICE detention center in our state. So we send the message that we don't want ICE here, and we realize people are profiting off of harming those who are in ICE detention centers. Instead, I will work with Congress to help create a real pathway to citizenship, like the Bracero programs and the programs of the past that allowed those who wanted to work here to have the chance to do that. And when anyone, including an ICE agent, violates California law, I will direct the California Highway Patrol to arrest them. If you break California laws, you will be arrested. We will protect everyone here. And as governor, I will restore healthcare to undocumented immigrants because it's the right thing to do. I passed that policy as a legislator. It will save money as people are not going to emergency rooms for care that could be done in a more preventative way. And I will work with Congress to abolish ICE and create a pathway to citizenship.
Okay, let's move on to healthcare. And you briefly touched on it just now. There are growing concerns about people losing or fearing they may lose access to healthcare due to the proposed federal cuts, including those associated with HR1, which actually are kicking in just as we speak. What steps would you take as governor to ensure equitable access to healthcare for Californians and also including low-income and vulnerable communities?
I fully support a single-payer healthcare system. I advocated for it as a legislator, supported the legislation, and do now. And here's why. I had a brother who lost his job and lost his insurance right at the time that he developed a very rare liver disorder. My brother didn't drink or smoke. And because he didn't have insurance, he couldn't see a doctor. And his condition worsened to the point that he lost his life. He was only 35 years old. No person should lose their life simply because they don't have health insurance. I believe that we can create a single-payer healthcare system and take the profit out of healthcare and put the emphasis where it belongs, on patients. And so we can reduce overhead costs and we can implement a system of single-payer healthcare. The effects of HR 1, or the big ugly bill, as I like to call it, are devastating. It's kicking people off of Medi-Cal. It's driving up the cost of premiums for the Affordable Care Act. I spent most of my career working with families who needed help from Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal is a federal entitlement, and that means if you qualify, you get it. And so we have to continue that tradition of supporting Medi-Cal for those. And as governor, I will work with Congress and a new Congress. I intend to see us flip Congress and work with a Democratic Congress majority that will allow us to reverse the effects of that bill so that we can bring back more of those individuals who have been kicked off of the rolls of Medi-Cal in our state, and to build out a healthcare system that places the emphasis on patients over profits.
Thank you. And finally, I wanted to ask you about affordability. It's a major concern across the state, and the cost of housing, transportation, food. What role should the governor play in addressing this? And you were the one candidate who mentioned during the CBS debate the tax on billionaires. How would that help?
If we tax people who have more than, say, $150 million in assets, we could provide more resources for schools, for jobs, for healthcare. I've endorsed the current billionaire tax that will be on the ballot, that will help to stem some of the cuts from HR 1, that will help to prevent closing hospitals. And I've always believed that you can't tax working people and middle-class people anymore. My belief is that we should be taxing the same billionaires who got the tax break that came from HR 1, and tax those billionaires so in turn we can give more money to working Californians and middle-class Californians in the form of a tax credit. They have more money in their pocket every single month to pay for the rising cost of gas, groceries, and housing. I'm the only candidate who's going to say it. The governor and the state can't just make prices go down, but we can create conditions that ultimately will support bringing costs down. Two ways. One, immediate relief for Californians in the form of this tax credit that I've talked about. And two, building more housing units, more supply, which over time will help to bring the cost down. We are experiencing a crisis of supply and demand. The state has not invested in affordable housing in over a decade. Now, I, on the other hand, am supporting legislation that would put a $10 billion bond before the voters to decide if they would support it. And if we pass it, that means we have $10 billion to build affordable housing for the people of our state. As governor, I will also prioritize providing down payment assistance grants to people who want to buy their first home in the state of California. That's the American dream. It's slipping away. We've got to make that possible again. And I would say that one of the signature components of my platform is a plan to build 2 million housing units by the year 2030, largely using the surplus property that school districts have in every single county in this state. But we have to help school districts to have some startup money to do the pre-development work and technical assistance to know how to work with developers. Now, this doesn't mean that if you're a school district employee, that your employer is going to be your landlord. It's not like that. It just means that districts will now have resources to work with developers who can build housing for teachers and classified staff. But also, I want to extend that to nurses, to those who work in public safety, city and county employees, folks who can get on the ladder of having affordable rents, so that they get on a path to home ownership. Or we can build affordable housing, but we have to make sure that we hold big businesses accountable that have bought up all of the properties and they're just sitting on it and they're speculating. Under my administration, we will levy heavy fees on those companies to free up that stock. So the more supply we have, it will meet the demand and help us to bring down the costs.
Thank you. Let's move on to questions from the floor. I'm gonna call on my colleague Sunita Sorachi to ask your question regarding the ban on undocumented children in schools.
Thank you, Pilar, and thank you, Superintendent Thurmond. My question: 6 states are currently considering legislation which would ban undocumented children from getting a primary education, K through 12 public education. As governor of California, how would you ensure that all children in the state have access to free K through 12 education?
Thank you, Sunita. Look, my read of the Constitution is that it guarantees the right to an education for all children, including undocumented children. That is a principle upon which we have hung our priorities in the way that we support California children, including those who are undocumented. And as governor, we will protect those children. And I will continue to communicate with the 1,000 school districts to say that we must admit these children. They have a right to education in the same way that I passed the legislation that said we should never give any information about any of our nearly 6 million students to ICE. We've done trainings with our school districts to know how to understand their rights as it relates to ICE, and that they can never admit ICE at a school campus unless they come with the appropriate documentation. And to date, we have not had ICE in our schools. Sometimes they do try to hang around our campuses, but I believe that we can protect our students and ensure their right to an education. Again, working with Congress to create a federal policy that says that undocumented immigrants have the right to an education, that we create a pathway to citizenship. So, Anita, I would go as far to establish a new precedent in California that says that students who live in countries that border our state, like Mexico, if you live close enough to the border, I would like to see many of those students be given the opportunity to come in, have education in California, particularly high school students who we can dually enroll in a community college. This does 3 things. 1, it gives revenue to our school districts that are struggling from declining enrollment. 2, it helps our community colleges around their enrollment. And 3, it helps us to build out a workforce that I think is going to help us to fill many of the key jobs that are right now going unfilled in the state of California.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question, and I'm going to read it for him from Jorge Macias at Latino Sentinel. He says, Mr. Thurmond, you're an advocate for paid forward legislation to defer tuition until graduation. How will this idea function if the state of California is reducing degree requirements and over 30,000 state jobs now emphasize experience over degrees? Is that so?
Well, here's why I think it's still important to have a program like Pay It Forward. You know, all my life, I'm 57 years old. All my life, I've heard people say that they remember the days when they could go to the UC for free. Today, we have the opposite. California students have more debt than we've ever seen before. And so Pay It Forward is an idea that is grown from the understanding that if we can reduce the debt that our students have to get an education, that they can put that money towards something else. They can use it to buy a home. They can use it to launch a business. And so Pay It Forward simply says that we support the government's ability to help our universities allow a student to attend for 4 years where they defer the cost until they graduate. And when they graduate and they get a job, they start to pay back what was provided for them. This becomes the pool of dollars for the next group of students to also have a chance to get an education. You know, I would also say, Jorge, it's not just about getting a college education, but we still know that wages typically are higher for those who get a college degree. But I'm someone who believes that we have to support those who want to work in college or in an apprenticeship training program, those who want to work in construction, those who want to work in apprenticeships like in the fire service, where you don't have to have a degree. And we create opportunities for what we call college and career. I'll give you a perfect example. In the biotech industry, a person can have a PhD, they can have a bachelor's degree, or they can have a high school diploma and continue to earn money. Every certificate that they get, they earn more money. Biotech might be about a $3 or $4 trillion sector for California. It's creating life-saving drugs and at the same time creating an opportunity for Californians to have good paying jobs. And so I want young people to be on whatever path makes the most sense for them. But if they choose to go to college, I want a program like Pay It Forward to help bring down the debt for them. And I want to be able to help Californians right now who can't participate in the workforce because they can't find childcare that they can afford. Childcare costs the same as a college university. So I intend to, as governor, establish a universal childcare program that'll bring down the costs, that will support all of our small businesses that are mostly women-led, women of color-led businesses to provide childcare. And now we're providing quality care for children. We're allowing parents to work. We're supporting small businesses. And at the same time, a universal child care program is estimated to bring about $22 billion into the California economy. I would say we all will benefit from such a program. And I'm thinking about end of life issues too. As someone, I was raised by my cousin after my mom passed away. Now she's elderly. I'm taking care of her and her husband. And most Californians are going to have to put $100,000 out of their pocket to care for a loved one. As governor, I want to pilot a long-term care insurance program to help anyone, if you don't qualify for IHSS, that you can get support. They're doing this in Oregon and other states. I believe California can do the same and do it better.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We have a question from Manuel Marquina from La Voz, bilingual newspaper. Do you support rent control expansion statewide? Why or why not?
I do. I think we have to have rent control. We've seen the rent go up in astronomical ways. And I think that those who rent must be protected. And I think it's fair to create a balanced scenario where there is rent control, but still allow someone who is a property owner to be able to increase the rent enough to keep pace with the cost of the maintenance of that unit. Let's face it, many people in our state have one or two small properties that either they inherited or it's their nest egg that allows them to have a few dollars in retirement. And so we can balance rent control that protects the renter from price gouging and at the same time allow the property owner to have a reasonable increase in the rent over time to keep pace with the cost of the maintenance so that way that the renter is getting quality and safety where they live.
Okay, we have a question in the chat from Cora Oriel. I'm going to read it just in the interest of time. How do you plan to keep or bring back businesses in the state? And there was another question from Henrietta talking about how billionaires are already leaving the state. How do you address this issue?
I think the way we prevent billionaires from just leaving or their dollars leaving is we work with Congress. Congress is right now considering a national wealth tax. And I believe that if California does pass a wealth tax, it should also be in conjunction with the national wealth tax. And so if there's a national wealth tax, and Senator Sanders has a bill for it, as does California Congress member Ro Khanna. Now, I've written a letter in support of this national wealth tax so that California won't fall victim to billionaires taking their money someplace else. Have you noticed other states are beginning to follow California? Now New York is considering a wealth tax. And if the national wealth tax legislation does not pass, I think its time is now and good. I will work with other governors to say you too should have a wealth tax because we know that most states are just struggling to provide aid and care for their people. Think about it. 40% of our homeless are older Californians. Our state needs to have more resources to help them, and the 10,000 homeless teens that I have referenced. And so we can't tax working people anymore. We can't tax small businesses anymore. And what I'll do for small businesses is I will create incentives for the cities that they're based in to reduce all of their paperwork, their bureaucracy, their permitting, to make it easier for small businesses to operate, and then to provide low interest loans or no interest loans to small businesses to help them to upgrade their stores, upgrade their business, to help them focus on their most important thing, getting customers in the door. And so small business is the backbone of our economy. And our state spends billions out of every single state department. I want to make sure that small business owners are getting a chance to contract and subcontract for the work that's coming out of the state of California, out of their tax dollars. And so we will work with small businesses to help them have the opportunity to get support, to remove the burdens and the bureaucracy. And I intend to bring redevelopment agencies back to our state to help support more housing and more economic development in our downtown corridors, in our Main Street corridors, stimulate businesses so that there will be more business growth. That growth, every dollar that comes from supporting those small businesses will probably generate another $6 that goes into each of those local economies. And so small business will be at the forefront of our economic development policy.
Thank you so much. There's a comment/question from Alfonso Sierra. He says, immigration is important for all in the U.S. Now, GEO has expanded their services, this is the private prison company, by reopening the Central Valley Annex in McFarland. What will you do to keep this from happening? Kern County now has approximately 5 detention centers.
You know, I wrote the original legislation to ban for-profit prisons in California in the first place. Then Governor Jerry Brown said he vetoed that legislation. He said that we needed private prisons to help us deal with our prison overcrowding situation. And I came at it again, and I sponsored legislation as an assembly member with then Assembly Member Bonta that said no private prisons. But GEO is very sneaky. They have found ways, and now there are 7 ICE detention centers in our state. I think that this is the most reckless immigration policy that we've ever seen. It's not protecting anyone. It's not establishing rules for how you become a citizen. I believe that the whole purpose behind President Trump's dangerous and reckless immigration policy is to help his friends make money, like Core Civic and GEO. And that's why I'm sponsoring legislation that's in the state legislature right now that imposes a 50% tax on any company that's operating an ICE detention center. Core Civic is already telling its investors that they may have to leave California. Good riddance. We don't want you here. And I hope other states follow that same model. We understand now that because there is a financial objective to this immigration policy, we have to hit them in their wallet. We have to meet them where they are. And that means a 50% tax on any company that operates an ICE detention center.
We have a question from Henrietta Burrows, and she asked, you create a pathway to citizenship, but the current administration is interested in having a pathway to is not interested in having a pathway to citizenship, but maintaining the white majority in this country. What would you say to this description of what's currently happening in this country?
I think you're correct, but I think look at the economic toll that the president's reckless immigration policy is having on the entire nation. And that's not just affecting a blue state like California. It's affecting red states in every key sector, including for us, agriculture. We send out, $500 billion to the world. And so we've got to make sure that we have people who can do the work in agriculture, hospitality, construction. All of these sectors have been deeply impacted, and we've got to make sure that we have a workforce that will do these important jobs. And I believe that the other states are going to be interested. We will work with Congress. Now, ultimately, as governor, I will be working hard to make sure that we elect a different occupant in the White House, someone who is committed to creating a reasonable path to citizenship. But I believe that we can show from an economic standpoint that we have to change the course of this country. And the American people have demonstrated that they will support a pathway to citizenship. The majority of Americans, when polled, have said they do not agree with the type of immigration action that we've been seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. And so I believe that there is momentum, but we have to work to build it and it's going to be multi-steps. And I think we can show that not just California, but many states and red states are being affected. And when we do that, I believe that we will get cooperation to ultimately reverse this immigration policy, abolish ICE, and create a pathway to citizenship for those undocumented immigrants who are providing billions into Social Security, into our taxes, even though they can't get anything out of the Social Security system.
Do you think abolishing ICE is a realistic project, and how would you do immigration enforcement?
I think it is realistic. I think ICE is showing that it is a failed entity. The lives of Americans that have been lost just because they protested ICE, the number of people who've lost their lives in ICE detention centers and who've experienced horrible and horrendous conditions, from health to lack of sanitary environments. I think it's okay to get rid of ICE, abolish it, scrap it, and start all over again and create a new way to enforce immigration in our borders. It's okay to have immigration enforcement, but when you have officers who are poorly trained, who have access to weapons, who aren't following the Constitution, who just take lives of those who protest, clearly this is a system that is not working. And so it's time to start all over again. And for those ICE agents who will be in California, I will enforce our laws against them. I will direct our Attorney General to prosecute anyone who violates California law. I believe that we can create a space where we can reverse the impacts of this immigration policy, but it may take some time in terms of electing a new Congress, which is going to happen this November, and working towards getting a better president in the White House. And we will continue that work. And as governor, I will make this a top priority.
We're about to finish very soon, but there are several questions that I've received in the chat that are worried about this. And I'm going to ask Araceli Martinez question. She's with Excelsior, California. Superintendent Thurmond, you did not qualify for the next CNN gubernatorial debate due to your low polling numbers. And some voices have said you should leave a race. What are your thoughts about that? Will you continue? And in the case that you don't continue, who could you endorse?
Well, I'll be really honest. I just don't think that polls elect anyone. People do. This has been the most unusual election that I've ever seen before. And people running around telling people to drop out because they have a fear that two Republicans are going to get elected. And, unfortunately, this is the system that we have. We have a top two system. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. But here's my situation. I can only speak for myself. I've been in 5 elections where I was outpolled, outspent, and flat out told that I would never win. They say someone like me could never win this election. Someone who's the son of immigrants who lost both his parents by the time he was 6 years old, someone who worked for $3 an hour, someone who became a social worker to help foster youth and ultimately became the state superintendent, and who's going to make sure that we have single payer and that we tax billionaires and that we build 2 million housing units. And so I believe that the voters have a right to know what we have to offer. I participated in a debate 2 days ago, and the LA Times said Tony Thurmond was the one who won this debate. I want voters to know that I've been elected twice statewide in the state of California with more than 5 million votes, even when they spent $30 million against my campaign. Our data shows us that when voters hear our message, that they like what we're working on and that we have a path to victory. And so my name is on the ballot. I'm in it to the end, and I'm running to win. And I won't make any contingencies. I don't want to work for another governor. I'm not looking for a job in anybody's administration. This is the last office I'm ever going to run for. I'm running to be governor because the governor has the most influence over what happens in our state. I'm not running for president, and that means that I can make California solely my focus and that we do the things that need to be done, even if they're not popular. And so I'm asking you all to tell the story so that your readers and your followers, they can go to TonyThurmond.com. They can make a contribution to our campaign to get our message out, and they can follow what we're doing to make a better California and to join our journey into serving the 40 million people in this great state.
Thank you, Superintendent Thurmond. We have more questions that time to answer them, but you have been great in answering all the questions we threw at you and spending these 30 minutes with us during the busy campaign season. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you for really capturing the voices of people in California, people of different ethnicities who sometimes the big debates leave out. We've had debates planned where there wouldn't be a single person of color. And yes, I want to be the first person of African descent and the first Latino to serve as governor, but I want to be the best governor that California has had, who fights for working people, not for billionaires. And so thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to your followers, your listeners, and your readers.